I couldn't sleep that night. The more I thought about the video, the more I realized just how much had been done behind my back. It wasn't just about the barn, it was the betrayal, the lies, the fact that this woman, someone who had asked to borrow the place to store furniture, had turned it into a whole business without telling me, and now the whole internet knew about it before I did. The next morning, I drove straight over to the barn. I wanted to see it with my own eyes, and when I got there, I couldn't believe it. The exterior had been painted in a rustic white finish, with hanging flower baskets and a vintage welcome sign by the door. It looked beautiful, I'll admit, but it also didn't look like my property anymore. It felt like someone had taken a piece of my history and put their own name on it. As I walked up, a couple came out with suitcases. Tourists, from Colorado, they said. They smiled and thanked me for the amazing stay. I smiled back awkwardly, trying to process what they were saying. They thought I was part of this. They thought I was the host. Karen had been running this under my name. I went inside and was stunned again. The barn had been completely remodeled. Hardwood floors, a small kitchen, a loft with a bed, fairy lights wrapped around the beams. It was like something out of a home design show. There were even little handmade signs saying home is where the barn is and farm fresh vibes. It was charming. But it wasn't hers, it was mine, my family's. My memories were in that place. My grandfather's tools were stored in a back corner. The smell of hay, long gone now, had once been part of every visit. Now, it smelled like lavender and lemon. I finally called Karen. She answered cheerfully, as if nothing had happened. I didn't yell, but I was firm. I asked her why she turned my barn into a rental without permission. She laughed and said, I was going to tell you, but it just sort of took off. People loved it, and I didn't want to bother you with the details. You're so busy these days. Busy. I was busy, sure, but that didn't mean I'd given up ownership of my property. She acted like she was doing me a favor. I asked her how long this had been going on. Almost 6 months, she said. You wouldn't believe the reviews. 5 stars across the board. I even got featured on a TikTok travel account. That's probably the one you saw. I stood there in the barn, surrounded by her little touches and renovations, feeling like a stranger in my own space. I told her we needed to talk in person. She said she'd come by the next day. That night, I stayed in the barn alone. I canceled the upcoming bookings using the Airbnb host account, which, by the way, had been set up under her name, not mine. I had to email Airbnb and prove ownership of the property just to access it. The support team took some convincing, but they eventually locked the listing. Karen showed up the next afternoon with a bottle of wine and a forced smile. Let's not make this weird, she said. It's been going great. You could actually make some money if you let me keep running it. I told her no. I told her what she did was a serious breach of trust, possibly even illegal. She waved it off like I was being dramatic, but I wasn't. I had every right to be upset. That's when she got defensive. She said she'd invested money in the renovations, that she deserved some return on what she'd done, that people loved the place now, and I was ruining something special by shutting it down. I reminded her that she had done all of this without asking, that no matter how special the barn had become, it wasn't hers to claim. Then she dropped the biggest bomb. I thought maybe we could co-own it, she said. I've already made a business plan. We could call it Rustic Dreams by Karen and my name. I almost laughed. Co-own my property. She had crossed a line, and she didn't even realize it. I told her she had a week to remove her belongings and undo whatever she could. I didn't want to erase everything. Some of the changes were nice, but I wanted the barn back under my control. No more guests. No more videos. No more Karen. She left without saying much, but the next morning, I noticed something odd. A new TikTok. She was crying, telling her followers that she had been kicked out of her dream project by a jealous landlord. Comments poured in, defending her. Some even called me names. I didn't want to respond online. I didn't want to make this public, but now it already was. So I posted one video. Just one. I calmly explained the situation, that the barn belonged to me, that I never gave permission, and that while I appreciated her creativity, what she had done wasn't legal or ethical. I included old photos of the barn from my childhood, my grandfather working there, the original structure, everything that showed it was mine. That video blew up. It got over 3 million views in 3 days. And slowly, the comments turned in my favor. People started realizing what had happened. Some even apologized for doubting me. Karen didn't post again. After that. In the following days, I cleaned out the barn. I kept a few decorations, added some of my own, and started turning it into something meaningful again. Not an Airbnb, but a space for family, friends, maybe even small events. Something that honored my past, not someone else's. Branding. The experience changed how I looked at boundaries, trust, and ownership. Karen had turned my barn into something trendy and beautiful, but she did it through deception. And while the internet might forgive that for the sake of aesthetic, I couldn't. And as for TikTok, well, let's just say I keep a closer eye on it now. You never know when your own life might end up trending, without your permission. After the dust settled and the barn was back under my control, I realized the story didn't end there. People online continued talking about it. Micro-celebrities started showing up at my door with laptops, asking to cover the amazing barn comeback. Local TV crews even reached out. It felt surreal. My quiet weekend project had turned into something that everyone wanted a piece of. I didn't want to be exploitative, but I also saw an opportunity. Maybe I could turn this into a useful lesson for others, a cautionary tale and a story of resilience. So I began planning a live stream and a follow-up video that would be more than just a complaint. It would be a guide for property owners on how to protect themselves in the digital age. First, I reached out to a property rights nonprofit. They offered to team up with me and create a public webinar on digital representation rights, misleading rental listings, and what to do if someone appropriates your space online. I also got a few lawyers to volunteer to speak about takedowns, cease and desist letters, and how to file fraud reports. While all that was cooking behind the scenes, I focused on repairing the barn literally and emotionally. I spent weeks scrubbing the floors, patching holes in the roof, and restoring part of the original hayloft. I didn't want an Airbnb setup. I wanted it to feel like home. I added warm string lights, handmade furniture from reclaimed wood, and family photos, but all with a purpose and with permission from my closest relatives. The focus was on authenticity. Between videos, I posted behind-the-scenes clips, me sanding a beam, talking about this was Grandpa's mark, or showing the names carved into an old wooden beam by my cousins years ago. Those small, personal moments resonated with people more than anything else. Comments shifted from legal strategy to emotional connection. Your barn feels like a home again, one person wrote. So proud of how you reclaimed it. Then came the live stream. I set it up in the barn's open loft area, with a simple backdrop of exposed beams, soft lighting, and a camera setup that felt warm and honest, not slick. I started by introducing myself, the story, and why this mattered so much. I walked through each step, spotting the listing, contacting Airbnb, engaging legal help, confronting Karen, and bringing it all home. I shared lessons and practical takeaways, with downloadable links for property owners to use in case they face similar situations, goose chase templates, affidavit lines, and official request letters. Viewers asked questions live. Can I sue for damages? What if they use my pictures? Will Airbnb reimburse me? My answers were precise because I'd done the work. Some legal advisors logged into, offering real-time verification. One guest shared her experience. Someone used her backyard event venue photos and created a fake listing. She said, "I wish I'd seen your video weeks ago. I'd have acted faster." The chat lit up with support and applause. It turned into more than a story. It became a community. When the webinar ended, we had over 15,000 live viewers, dozens of shared screenshots, and an outpouring of gratitude. People thanked me for turning something that felt violating into something empowering. It became clear that the story had grown bigger than my barn. It had become a movement to protect personal spaces from digital appropriation. Not long after, a small group reached out. They were barn restorers, Airbnb cabin owners, and even a wedding venue owner, all with the fear that someone could borrow their space online without permission. They told me they'd already started setting up owner-only alerts on platforms, watermarking their photos, and gathering official documentation. They said my story had changed their approach. Meanwhile, media outlets, both local and national, started referring to me as the barn owner who took back her space, or TikTok's unintended hero. Some called it the barn versus Airbnb saga, It was bizarre to hear those headlines, but also validating. I wasn't looking for fame, I just wanted something real. As for Karen, I never heard from her again. The Airbnb account was suspended permanently, but rumors persisted. Someone claimed she started a similar scheme in another state, but it was quickly shut down as soon as it was reported. Whether she learned her lesson or simply moved on, I don't know. But I do know that she couldn't erase my Barnes story. She couldn't take my history offline. Eventually, I hosted a small community day in the barn, inviting neighbors, friends, and anyone who'd followed the story. We shared food, stories, and laughter under the string lights I'd installed. There was no commercial event, no Airbnb listing, just people connecting. I spoke about what had happened and why it mattered, about identity, ownership, and community. We even carved a small plaque near the door: reclaimed, restored, remembered, 2025. During that gathering, a local reporter asked me what I learned most. I said it wasn't legal strategy or online engagement, it was understanding what the barn meant to me and to the people who'd been part of my life. That emotional anchor made everything meaningful. It was a reminder that even in a world of digital replication, the real story is still in the human connection. After the community day, I realized the story had evolved. It was no longer about Karen or Airbnb, it was about how people can reclaim their identity online. I started speaking to organizations about representing the rights of content creators and property owners, because if you can fake a barn listing, you can manipulate any personal space. So I pitched the property rights nonprofit about a nationwide toolkit. They agreed. Now, as I'm recording this, the barn stands in the background, lights off, stillness in the air. It's not a rental, it's just living space again. Full of memories, full of quiet. It's a reminder that you don't need millions of followers or legal muscle, you need clarity, community, and courage. This is where part 3 ends: the kidnapping of my property, the fight for reality, and the community reclaiming what was mine. But the story continues. Part 4 will dive into the unexpected long-term changes, how Airbnb updated policies, how local governments responded, and how this saga shifted public thinking about property in the digital age. It's not done yet. Following the community gathering, I began noticing significant ripples beyond my little property. Airbnb privately reached out again, this time not just to remove the fake listing, but to ask for my input on developing better policies to protect property owners. They wanted me to speak with their legal and policy teams. A bit overwhelming, but also encouraging. My story had become a case study. Around the same time, a local government representative contacted me. They were drafting rural tourism guidelines and wanted to reference my experience as a cautionary tale. The idea was to help small property owners recognize how their images and locations could be misused online. I agreed to provide quotes and participate in community outreach workshops. It was surreal, me, a regular person from a small town, now influencing policy on digital representation. On top of that, several news outlets asked if I'd write op-eds on this issue. The Wall Street Journal invited me to contribute, so did Medium's tech ethics section. I wrote about the blurred line between property ownership and online identity. My piece discussed how someone could virtually appropriate a place and monetize it without ever stepping foot on it. The words poured out. This wasn't real estate theft in the traditional sense, it was representation theft, a new frontier we needed to understand. Back at the barn, I created a modest setup, a small desk with a laptop and a mic, where I recorded short videos about digital safety for landowners. My plan was simple: lead by example, offer free advice, and bridge the gap between legal reality and digital practice. I filmed topics like how to watermark images, how to search for fake listings, how to be ready with property records, and how to engage a platform when something goes wrong. None of it was glamorous, but it felt tangible. Within a few weeks, property owner groups, farmers markets, countryside B&B owners, remote rental hosts started reaching out. They shared concerns that their barns, cabins, and even backyards could be listed without permission. Some had already found similar fake listings. One couple had seen their farmhouse listed on multiple platforms. Another found photos of their tiny home on a rental site in another country altogether. My project became a movement. Meanwhile, Airbnb announced a platform-wide policy update. They introduced a new owner verification process for any listing to remain active beyond a 30-day trial period. Hosts must now provide property deeds matched with underwriter-approved geolocation tagging, along with multiple time-stamped interior photographs. They also implemented an AI scanning tool to match listings against recent social media posts for potential fakes. I was consulted for guidance during development. When the policy change took effect, it felt like a small victory not just for me, but for any property owner. Local governments began adopting the policy too. In my county, the Rural Tourism Board updated its guidelines, advising people to keep visual records, watermarks, and to monitor short-term rental platforms routinely. Some counties even held free workshops. Barn owners came to ask questions. I joined as a guest speaker. Standing in front of tables of farmers and hosts, I felt like I'd stepped into a role I never expected. Internet-era advocate for property protection. Then came a surprising twist. A major content creator reached out, a YouTuber with over 1 million subscribers. They wanted to make a short film about the saga, featuring me, some of the guests, and a virtual before and after of the barn. They produced a 10-minute video titled "The Barn Scam That Changed Airbnb." The video reached over 2 million views in the first week. Trust shattered online. This wasn't just my barn anymore, it was a symbol. People thanked me for sharing and saw the importance of vigilance. Some even offered to help me start a nonprofit, Protect Your Place, a simple site where people can register property photos, get digital alerts if someone reposts them, and access legal templates. We're in early stages now, but the dream is grounded in something real. Everyday people securing their spaces online. However, not all was straightforward. With increased visibility came more scrutiny. Karen's side emerged again, a defender claiming she had a legitimate but private verbal agreement. They said Airbnb misinterpreted the situation. They demanded public apology and compensation for her lost income. Some forgery accusations started swirling. A few online threads demanded to know if this was all a PR stunt. I looked back at those early screenshots, the certified mail receipts, and all the evidence. I knew what had happened, and I refused to back down. Karen's small legal push didn't gain traction. Airbnb confirmed the actions, local media supported my documentation, and the sheriff's files backed my version. But the experience taught me that transparency was critical. To avoid defamation claims and trolls, I made every document public property. Records, everyone's statements, timestamps, legal letters, everything I was allowed to share. That transparency became the backbone of my project. I realized that honesty doesn't just protect others, it protects you too. By the time Part 4 winds down, the landscape had changed. Airbnb rolled out a global campaign around secure listings. The newsroom told me, "Your barn story forced us to rethink trust." Policy teams everywhere searched for barn listing scam and my name. And me, I was still that same person who loves an old barn with memories of family and weekend projects. But now, I also carried the responsibility of being a voice people could turn to when tech blurred the lines of ownership. I didn't expect the storm to get any worse, but it did. Within days of speaking to the police and trying to regain control over the property, I noticed new people were still checking into the barn. Even after I had removed Karen's name from the rental platform, turns out, she had made multiple fake listings across other short-term rental websites, some even with slightly different photos and names, but they all used my barn, my address, my property. This was no longer just a messy situation. This was now becoming a web of fraud. I was tired. Tired of the drama, the emails, the strangers, and the helpless feeling of being out of control of my own land. But something in me decided I had to fight back in a way Karen didn't expect. So I made a video. I stood in front of the barn and calmly recorded myself explaining what happened. The fake Airbnb, the guests showing up, the TikTok discovery, and the woman who hijacked my barn. I wasn't angry in the video. I was just honest. The video went viral in a matter of hours. People couldn't believe the story. It didn't feel real. Some thought it was staged. Others were furious on my behalf. But one thing was certain, the story was out now. And Karen couldn't hide behind usernames and fake listings anymore. Within a day, people started to track her down online. They sent me links to her social media accounts, her past reviews as a guest and host, and even similar complaints from people in other states. Apparently, this wasn't her first rodeo. The internet had become my army. I received dozens of messages from people offering to help, legal advice, property protection services, even former guests who unknowingly stayed in the barn and now felt guilty for being part of it. I forwarded everything to my lawyer, and we began building a strong case. Meanwhile, I finally met with a local news reporter who wanted to cover the story. They came out to the property, filmed the barn, and interviewed me. I talked about how shocking it is when someone takes what's yours and uses it so openly. It felt like my privacy, my peace, and my rights were all stripped without warning. The news piece aired on a Sunday evening, and by Monday morning, Karen's name was trending for all the wrong reasons. She tried to deny it at first, claimed the barn was co-owned, which was a complete lie. Then she said I gave verbal permission, which again never happened. Every time she opened her mouth to defend herself, she just made it worse. And the pressure got to her. A week later, she took down all the listings. She deleted her TikTok and Airbnb accounts. She even tried reaching out to apologize, sort of. Her message was vague and full of excuses, blaming confusion, bad memory, and how she just wanted to help. But I didn't respond. I forwarded it straight to my lawyer. Eventually, the case made its way into court. It was long, frustrating, and full of delays, but in the end, the truth won. The judge ruled in my favor. Karen had to pay damages, including all profits made from the barn, compensation for trespassing, and legal fees. She was also barred from operating any short-term rentals in the county for several years. I wish I could say I felt victorious, but honestly, the whole thing left me more cautious than anything. I had learned a hard lesson about trust, especially blind trust, and about how bold some people can be when they think no one's watching. But I had also seen how powerful truth can be, especially when shared at the right moment. One video changed the course of this entire experience. It gave me support, visibility, and in the end, justice. Since then, I've taken extra measures to secure the barn and the rest of my property. Cameras, signage, legal paperwork, the works. And I've used this experience to help educate others online about property rights and digital fraud. If it happened to me, it could happen to anyone. People ask me all the time, why didn't I just turn the barn into an Airbnb myself? Well, maybe I will someday. But not because of what Karen did. If I ever do, it'll be on my terms, with my name, and my key in the lock. Until then, that barn will stay just what it was meant to be. A quiet, peaceful part of the land I love. No guests, no strangers. No secrets, just mine again. And that's exactly how it should be.